Okay, I have 4 o'clock. We will go ahead and call the meeting to order. Looks like we have everyone except for Mr. Perkins, I believe. So I hope everyone's had a chance to look over the agenda for today's meeting. I guess with that being said, Bill, I will open it up to you.
Very good. Thank you, President Stein, members of the board. Thanks for the opportunity to bring you together yet again to conduct some very important business for the High School Activities Association. You're going to be faced with some difficult challenges, not just today, but in the days ahead. And certainly you've always been willing and ready to rise to the challenge. I just think about the challenge today, and I think about the last news cycle, and know that recently we had a state board that was split 5-5 and made a difficult decision, at least an outcome to a decision. And then just yesterday, the afternoon news cycle contained news that we may have to go back to phase 4 based upon data versus maybe we're at a plateau and headed the right direction. I'm sorry, down to phase 2 as opposed to progressing as we'd hoped to. So there's no good answers as we move forward. In fact, we know that every decision that is made is right and every decision is wrong. We're going to ask you to make the best bad decision today of the summer, but it's only bad because that's the only choice. We have a lot of bad choices and bad options that are out there. So I know you're ready for that. Our overview today really is based upon some of the data that you have asked for and shared. We're going to share with you now a slide from the National Federation. We'll put that up so that you can review that slide. You'll look at that. We're going to review the data that came in from the superintendent survey in regards to school start time. That was interesting data, and I want you to have a chance to reflect upon that. Then we'll look at the options pending the outcome of a discussion, and know that you can move us forward by taking no action today, or move us forward by taking action that ends up with the board of directors, and that would result in a final action of the executive board today. So I'll start with just providing that, but before I do, Mr. Stein, any further clarifications before we begin?
Sorry, I think I was muted. No, I think you've done a good job setting the table, and I think that we can proceed as planned.
Very good. Very good. Well, the slide that you see, I know you asked for data only from the superintendent's survey relative to start time. I did think that was pertinent to share some information and a graphic that was provided by the National Federation of High School. As recently as just this afternoon, I was on a Zoom call with all the 51 executive directors and talking about this very fluid situation. As you can see from the graphic, all of the blue states, which are 24 in number and probably going to grow, have made some modification to the fall season as they know it. That may be delaying a week. That may be delaying longer than that. It may be moving sports to one season to another. We do note that 6 states that have the red asterisk have moved football only to the spring season. Most of those have condensed a spring season down to, or a season down to a January, a school year activity season down to a January through June scenario, where they'll do a couple of months of their traditional winter sports and activities, then a couple of months for their fall activities, followed by a couple of months of the spring activities to end in late June. Certainly the Activities Association here in Kansas has made that consideration and feel as if that wasn't the right option at this point. But again, fluid situation, we do have that always as a resort as we move forward. So in fact, our staff is well prepared for that model. Other than solidifying dates and sites, I think we'd be in really good shape in that regard. So I wanted to share this slide, and now we'll move to the information that you requested. As you know, this past week, we did our most recent meeting, and at that meeting, we talked about the start date of August 17th and recognized the fact that it is so important that activities remain in their lane, and understand that we are still having student athletes earn the opportunity to represent their school in interscholastic competition. And we want to make sure that we don't get too far ahead. In fact, we should always be not the tail wagging the dog of education, but existing with that education and complementing it and extending it for the students that are in our member schools. As a result of the survey, you can see that we had a simple question that was asked of when do you plan to start? Again, this is a fluid situation. We had 263 of our 300 plus member districts respond to this. Of that, 11 are going to start the week of August 10th. 84 begin the week of August 17th. And then 96 begin the week of August 24, 31 the week of August 31. And then those that start the week of September 8th, which is the Tuesday immediately following Labor Day, was a total number of 40. And you see that data now instead of in the graphic in terms of the percentage of responses and the total number of responses. And you can look at this, and we're going to ask you to reflect upon that and share any insights on that data. And let that be one of the data points that you consider, and one of the factors that you consider as you look at potential rule modifications. Certainly, I think that it is important to note as you look at the responses, and Mr. Unruh did send that to you in a file earlier that included the names of the school districts that populate each of those areas, as well as their likely classification. Sometimes it's based on last year's classification. When it's a district, there may be a 5A, 6A, because a school district like Wichita or Topeka or Kansas City may have schools in both classifications. So we know that there's a large number of districts that start September 8th that are of that 5A, 6A category. And so you have to look at school density in terms of population and number of schools as well. Yet we weren't doing a vote on this. This was really just to provide a reflection on what are Kansas schools doing. And you see that the vast majority of schools are starting, at least those that have responded, the week of August 17th and 24th. As you know, our current practice day, according to our rule, is the Monday of standard practice start day is the Monday of standardized calendar week 7, which this year is anchored on August 17th. So that's the data, and certainly turn it back to you, Alan, to lead a discussion relative to any takeaways from that data, any further questions in that regard that you would like to process with the board.
Okay, thank you, Bill. Okay, so board, I hope everybody's had a chance to look at this. I know that it was presented to us a little bit ahead of the meeting, so that way we could take a closer look at it and try to digest some of the numbers and some of the information on there. And I would open up the floor for discussion. Mike, any thoughts that you have?
Hey, President Stein.
Yes, Mr. Haydock.
I'd just like to, say thank you to all the superintendents that did respond, and enjoyed reading their positive remarks, mostly positive, and just getting some of their insight and thoughts. But I think it did give us a look into what they're thinking. And I think that does provide us some good material to reflect on.
Thank you, Shannon. Others? Mr. Rosenhagen?
Yeah, I'm glad Bill pointed out, because the one thing that I did kind of take from the data was the later start of the schools, the bar graph that read those starting week of September 8th. And I think everybody probably did recognize that there was the majority of those schools, or a large number of those schools, were the larger districts. So definitely I took note of that as I looked through. And Bill pointed that out. Thank you.
Yes, correct. Mr. Perkins.
Well, one of the things I did notice, I know there was a lot of school board meetings held last night, including myself, and how many of the August 17th changed to the August 24th start date. Because I think as you read down through there's a lot of them that look like they were debating to start a little later. And I think a lot of that is to get things put in place before we do start with kids.
Mr. Stonebreaker?
I think the biggest thing that I noticed was over 70% of our schools appear to be starting by the week of August 24th, which to me is a fairly large number. And then also when you read the comments from our superintendents, I think you're going to get please start, you're going to get let's hold. I just don't know that there's a perfect answer to that. And echoing what Greg said, I did notice that some of the larger districts were those districts that were in the last two categories of the 31st and the 8th. But we did have a large percentage in the top three there.
Absolutely. Thank you. Mr. Marlin.
Yeah, what I noticed, and one thing that I think we probably need to look into, is those schools that did move back their start dates. Are they planning on also telling their students that since we moved our start date back a week, that will include activities starting? Or if we were scheduled to start on October or August 17th and we've moved it back to August 24th, can those athletes still begin practice on the 17th? Because I do think that's extremely important. And I think one of the things that we need to look into is the reason for moving the start date of schools back. Is it to simply give our teachers and staff an opportunity to get things ready to go and give us that extra time to get things ready to go in an environment that we're not sure of right now? Or is it an opportunity to maybe stop the flow of the virus and maybe try and get that under control in certain situations? And so from my standpoint, I think those are the two things that really matter the most, because I think we all know that most of the coaches around the state of Kansas, probably August 17th is a start date that they're all looking forward to. I don't think that they probably need an extra week to get prepared for football or volleyball or golf or cross country. But do we need to look at moving the start date back just simply for health reasons? And those are the concerns that I have.
Thank you. Mr. Castle.
I'm sorry, my computer's doing the same thing it did last week, and I'm missed on most of the discussion. But I'll say from the area I live in, I think most of the folks are ready to go, and would like to go as soon as possible, pending what happens with our numbers in the next 3 weeks. But everybody I talk to wants to see things continue or get started. for the mental health of kids as well as coaches. But we've got to be really careful. I know that.
Dina?
Thank you, Alan. I can't disagree with anything anyone else has said. I believe that kids and probably coaches are prepared, ready to go. From their point of view, I think the reason that districts chose to move their date, if they did, is probably a varied type response. But I also was glad to see that those schools that have the highest COVID increase in their communities right now chose that late option. I think it could be, someone last time said it was a fluid situation. I doubt that's changed. So I think we still need to be flexible in our response and try to probably keep the start dates somewhat similar so that everyone across the state kind of knows what's available or what's happening. But as I understand it, local districts can change. For example, if we say August 17th is the day that practices can start, if a local district doesn't seem to think that's correct, they can move it to another date anyway, and always have been able to do that. So I think we just need to remember that flexibility is probably going to be the name of the game.
Thank you. And I would agree with that. I think that, reading through some of the comments, even though some of them had stated they were going to start later, they were still going to continue with their summer workouts, which they have been doing. And then when it was time for practice, that transition into practice, they were going to start that transition into practice, even if they chose to start school at a later date. So I like I said, I'm still pretty firm on my stance that I discussed last week. I think it's the same. I think we have the opportunity to keep moving forward for as long as we can, and hopefully we don't have a setback. But I think that's the direction that I feel, and hopefully we'll be able to come to some agreement here in a little bit to decide what we're going to do and how we're going to move this forward. Mr. Herman.
Yeah, I just want to really, I know that there's folks watching this online, and I've received a lot of emails like all of us over the last few days. And I just appreciate receiving that information to make that decision that I think is in best interest for all kids across the state of Kansas. I am one of those representatives that's sitting in the Northeast where we're in a spike and in some difficult times, a suburb school that September 8th date. And I just absolutely can appreciate there are other parts of our state that need that opportunity. If we push dates back, we are going to ultimately push games back because of, we have to have so many practices before our kids are even allowed to compete. So we really have to look at that. And then finally, I think Mike said it, and I'm going to say it loud and clear: mental health. Our kids are absolutely needing something to go. And it's not only our kids, it's our coaches and our teachers and our buildings and those types of things. And like Tina said, local control, and those folks get to make those adjustments if they feel it. I will say that I know it's tough in a lot of areas, because if my rival high school is starting on August 17th, I'm really going to struggle if mine's starting on the 24th. So anyways, I appreciate all of the communication from around the state before this meeting today.
Absolutely. Thank you. So, Mr. Faflick.
Yes, sir. Well, good discussion, board, and I appreciate that. And certainly our staff has engaged in that and as well. And I think we agree with the comments that have been made. And I think it's really time now, President Stein, as we move forward to review what the options are and what the next part of the agenda will include for you.
Okay.
If you're ready for that, I can lead us through that.
We are ready for that. And I think this is about as good a time as any.
All right. Very good. Well, as I think of this executive board and what you're empowered to do, it is important to note that action that you take today could be final, but it also may require action by our board of directors. And our board of directors is a 78-member board. About 25% of them are brand new members, and this would be their first meeting if we decide to make any handbook rule changes. So I keep that in mind as we go forward. And let me throw out some options for you. And the one thing that you can do that this would be over today is say, we're going to practice starting on August 17th, and we're not going to alter any competition limits or any competition start dates. That would be a final action, and there would be no board of director meeting required. All of the following options that I share with you would require some type of board of director action, and we'll ask that you consider those as we move forward. Okay, we're gonna include one person on our board via phone, and hopefully Mr. Castle can hear us now a little bit more clearly than through the Zoom technology. So as we mentioned, that one action is really to stay with the August 17th date. You would be, by not providing a motion or support for a motion, remaining with our existing handbook rule and calendar. The second option would be just to propose a delay to the start of practice and or competition for all of our fall activities, or potentially select fall activities. That could be done on a risk mitigation basis in terms of the levels of activities, and we're very familiar with that and have had extensive discussion in that regard. Again, we require a board of directors action to concur with your recommendation. You could propose a delay to the start of practice or competition for schools in select classes, where maybe you treat 5A and 6A differently than you treat 1 through 4A, or maybe you treat 1A differently than you treat 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6A, based upon the data that you have. Again, would require some specific action and provide some significant challenges. All of these, none of these are perfect, or we would have had this in place many weeks ago. The next one I think that you would propose is to eliminate the postseason and conclude with league championships. Again, that's a challenge. We like schools like that pursuit of a championship, but that may be a recommendation and may be premature to make that recommendation at this point in time. You could also say we're going to cancel all of our fall activities and anything that can't be done virtually would simply not take place this fall, which also would require board action. Or you could postpone the beginning of our fall activities to occur in the spring or in that January through June window. Those are options our staff has really looked at and investigated and believe that we have a better recommendation for you out of that group. And I would like to share that with you now, unless you would like clarification on any of the ones that options that I shared with you at this time.
Bill, just one thing, and you may be getting to this part of it, but on the second option that you talked about, I believe it was where we would look at moving the competition start dates down a little bit, but our practice date would still stay the same as August 17th. Am I correct on that?
That's correct.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure I was correct on that and heard that correctly, but go ahead.
Yeah. And as I think as you make decisions today, it's going to be really important that you're making the decision as of today with the information that we have right now. We recognize that data and learning are going to continue to evolve, as well as the presence of and the unrealistic or the very realistic impact of COVID-19 in our school communities and across the state. That impact is going to be rolling. It's going to be geographically more significant. And we all play a part in mitigating that risk and helping our schools and our communities return to our new normal as quickly as possible. And it all starts with just simple maintenance to and adherence to the pillars of risk mitigation. Start with personal hygiene. Start with wearing a mask. We do that, we stand a better chance for school to be back in session, for teaching and learning to occur in the most normal possible and the most normal manner possible. As we talk, as we have talked as staff, and we have talked extensively with our staff and with you as a board, with all of the considerations that we have made, we want to make sure that it continues to be student health and student safety remain a top priority. As an association, we support that overall health. Just as Jason mentioned, the physical health that comes through sport participation, but also the mental health of our students. We recognize the activities administered by the association play a significant role in providing learning and growth opportunities for all stakeholders. With the participation, we also recognize there are risks, and our effort is to minimize those risks. This is a year, there's a new and an unexpected exposure for our students. We never thought we'd be sitting here talking about a national health crisis, a local health crisis, a pandemic, okay? But we don't want that exposure, we don't want that issue to deter our efforts to see our students benefit emotionally, socially, and physically through those participation opportunities in interscholastic activities. The connection points that our youth make with adults that care for them and want them to be successful in school today and beyond is significant and can never be forgotten. The methods that our coaches use may be altered, but the mission is not going to change. We know that our coaches do not coach football. They coach students. They coach students to collaborate, to pursue goals, to overcome adversity. Our coaches don't coach debate. They coach students. They coach students to think critically, to think analytically, to reason, and to communicate effectively. Our music teachers don't teach music. They use that medium to teach students, to inspire students, to help them be creative. The list can go on and on, but what we need to remember is that with the benefits, there are risks, and we need to assess those risks at the student level, at the school level, at the community level, and at the state level. Those risks are evaluated in regards to the opportunities that are afforded. If the risks are too much for the student or for their family or for the school, a choice to not participate is okay. And no one at the High School Activities Association or at any one of our member schools would think any less and do anything but support a decision made by those students or those families. A decision to participate is also made with confidence in knowing that our schools are well equipped. In fact, I can think of no better population that is equipped and prepared to support and lead our students in this time than the administrators and the coaches that are in the member schools of the Kansas State High School Activities Association. We believe that it would be appropriate to go through the following series of slides with you that we have developed over time and have now put before you as the recommendations for your consideration. Certainly we can, I'll move through the presentation, we can come back and make have any discussion on any point of those considerations. First, in regards to fall practice. As a proposal, we want to make sure that it is important to note that every school must maintain strict adherence to local health, to county guidance, and to county health authorities for their location. They know best what is happening in their neighborhood, and our schools and our athletic programs and interscholastic programs need to adhere to that guidance. We also know that there's a significant amount of information that was provided last week from members of this staff, where they boiled down and they synthesized the best guidance that is available at the local, state, national level, looking at what the National Federation of High Schools has provided, looking at what national governing bodies have provided for respective sport organizations, to have one set of documents that you can use at the school level to mitigate that risk. We believe that schools should have the ability to choose to begin practice no earlier than August 17th, which is our regular start date. That we also believe that there is no accommodation that should set aside our heat acclimatization protocol for those that are participating in what is the traditional August heat. In terms of competition, that is a different story. There may need to be some alterations based upon the level of risk associated with each of these. And when I talk of level of risk, these are identified by the National Federation and many other agencies that have provided input in this regard. Low risk activities like tennis, golf, and cross country might begin on their originally scheduled competition dates, as long as there is a maintenance and adherence to the expectations and considerations that have been provided. That means tennis and golf, where social distancing can be built in, and we cannot be lazy and just say, well, we'll have it just as normal. There are considerations to follow and need to be adhered to. Can begin competition as scheduled August 21. Cross country, first competition day of September 2. That would allow them to put in the required number of mandatory practices individually and as a team. Debate and Scholars Bowl no earlier than September 18th and 19th, which are both part of our handbook rule. So that takes care of those that stay the same. All of those activities maintain the original competition dates as scheduled in the handbook. And then we have another set of activities that have a higher risk. They're indoors, they involve face-to-face competition, they encroach upon the social distancing that we have been practicing. That intermittent exposure that exists in these activities can be overcome, again, with good hygiene, and at least moderated with good hygiene. And we believe that all of these activities should begin in competition no earlier than September 8th. Looking at them individually, gymnastics, that sets it back about 4 days from what its originally scheduled first competition date would be. With the number of schools that are participating and the conditions there, I believe that is going to be an appropriate response for our gymnasts across the participating membership there. In volleyball, September 8th is the first competition day, and soccer, both are at about the same position, about 10 days after they would typically begin competition. Helps those schools that decide to wait a week to start to still be ahead of the game. If they start practice now on August 24th to coincide with their beginning practice date, they can only be, they'd still be ahead of where they would be in a typical year. If they wait 2 weeks to begin practice, they're not far behind what the peers have started in regards to competition and would be okay. Likewise, with a 3 week later start coinciding with the September 8th date, competition, a few games behind their peers, but not significant. So we've tried to shrink that gap in between to provide a semblance of uniformity within that, yet still allow for that local decision in regards to when they begin practice, and then therefore begin that competitions no earlier than these dates. Football, in a similar manner, is behind by a week in this model. It allows for, we're probably not going to see very many football games played on September 8th, except at the middle school or the non-varsity level, since that is a Tuesday. Most varsity football games would probably begin that Thursday or Friday, the 10th or 11th of September. And with that opportunity, they will have missed week 1 of the regular season and would move forward as scheduled in that regard. And again, with all of these competitions, there's going to be times where schools cannot participate because they are going to have to quarantine, or they're going to have to set aside. That may be directed by local county health, and it may be directed by a local board. But certainly understanding that is a possibility starting sooner rather than later provides an opportunity for more games to be played this year while still adhering to the safety precautions that are in place. If you were to adopt this set of proposals, the following handbook rule changes would be impacted, and I've got a couple bonuses for you because they are necessary for this as well. Rule 35, our football rule, would be adjusted for the first day of competition. We would reduce the number of regular season football games from 8 at the high school level, or from 9 to 8 at the high school level, from 7 to 6 at the middle school, junior high school level. We would also ask that we take the football jamboree and know that it's a good thing, but it's not a good thing this year to take place. We'll focus on the games that can be played, practice with your team, and then be prepared for that first game in that regard. For the gymnastics, it would simply require a modification to the first day of competition this year. As noted, it's about 4 days later. Instead of the Friday of that week, it moves to the following Tuesday. Rule 38, soccer rule, would be modified for the first day of competition to be pushed back to that September 8th date. And we would reduce the number of available soccer matches at the high school level to 14 from 16, and the number of middle school, junior high school soccer matches from 10 to 8. From 9 to 8. So that's one less middle school, junior high soccer game. And as you remember, board, you understand that middle school, junior high sets their own season. There is not a culminating event at the end of that season, a championship. It's all done at the local level. Rule 43 for volleyball would need to be adjusted for the first day of competition to be September 8th, as opposed to the previous date. We would adjust the number of points available, and points are earned through participation, whether it's a dual, tri, quad, or invitational tournament. You get a certain number of allocated points, down from 36 to 30, and middle school, junior high would have 24 points, down from the original 30 points. So there is a modification there. We would also ask that the board consider, if there is a board of directors meeting, to modify Rule 51 in Scholars Bowl. Scholars Bowl has a requirement that they utilize a recognition system by participants, also known as a buzzer system. And if we are able to fully develop the draft of the virtual Scholars Bowl format, it may be more of a timed response as opposed to a first to buzz in, because sometimes technology does not recognize the first one to actually activate a timed response, and that buzzer system would become appropriate only in face-to-face, but in a virtual format, not necessary. Additional considerations for the board as you prepare to begin your deliberations, that as I started this conversation, student health and safety remain our number one consideration. It is always and will always be, as you know through our meetings, one of the very first agenda items that we discuss, as well as the decision point for the activities that we administer. And remember, this is about total student health, not just in one item in isolation. We do have some year-round activities that I had not mentioned. Those are music and spirit, and they would be able to continue to practice for local BOE guidance. Those, again, as without starting and ending of seasons, they're very fluid and have adapted quite well, and can be able to continue to do so. Certainly, as you have discussion through this afternoon, you can modify any part of what we have proposed for you. It is simply a recommendation from staff for your consideration as a starting point for the discussion. And it's based upon input from every one of our staff members and very lengthy discussions to bringing us to the point this afternoon. Any action that requires board of director affirmation, that would be the final vote, and I would anticipate that we would have a board of directors vote early next week. That would give each board member the opportunity that is on that 78-member board to touch base with their stakeholders, to reflect upon the actions that are proposed, and then to represent appropriately sometime early next week. If the executive board does approve these proposals, We're also going to, and then ultimately they're affirmed by the board of directors. I would expect that we would bring forward to you some manual changes that belong only to only under the jurisdiction of the executive board. It may be in the qualifying procedure for some of the activities, and it may be in regards to the seating procedure that we have. Simple considerations in football, such as marginal points, might need to be evaluated in terms of an average marginal points per game as opposed to a strict total number of marginal points. And how do you deal with a COVID-related cancellation as opposed to just a cancellation of a contest? So that would require future action, and our board is certainly going to be equipped to take us in the appropriate direction in that regard. Also, a future consideration for our board of directors, probably at their September meeting and potentially earlier, would be some allowance for compromised seasons to be concluded. That may be the resumption of suspended activities outside the calendar window, or it may just simply be setting aside our rule that says that your season ends with your elimination from the postseason following the conclusion of your regular season. And we have that just simply as a stakeholder to recognize that if a school endures a 3-week exemption from the ability to participate in football, their season went from 8 games down to 5 games, and therefore having that one final game would be okay only if we get that board of director action to concur. But certainly a consideration that we would flesh out as appropriate pending the outcomes of today's. Again, our focus this year is getting kids back into normal. Our focus this year is providing that normalcy that provides that stability, provides those connection points for adults and kids to be together in that participation, in that coach-athlete relationship, to provide that release and connection for our kids is so significant. So it's all about participation. Do we want to have championships? Absolutely. 2, it is premature to guarantee we're going to have championships at this point in the year. Our effort is to prepare for those championships. You heard me reference them multiple times earlier today, but we cannot guarantee that the weekend after Thanksgiving it's going to be appropriate to be playing football. Or the weekend of Halloween is going to be appropriate to be racing at cross country or playing volleyball. So more information to come. The closer we get to those, the better information we'll have and the ability to make better decisions at that point in time. So Mr. Stein, that is the summary of our presentation in terms of a recommendation for our board to consider and to start the discussion and the dialogue. Our staff is here as activity-specific experts to answer any of those questions, as well as the general questions that you may have.
Thank you, Bill, and thank you, staff, for all the time and effort that you guys have put into this. I know that it's been a long process, and like I said, you are greatly appreciated, and to you as well, Bill. So with that review that Bill has just concluded, I would open up the floor for discussion on the fall semester or fall season start dates and anything that you guys have to add to the cause. Mr. Rosenhagen?
You saw me inhale and thought I had something to say, didn't you?
Well, I saw you unmute, so go for it, Captain.
Yeah, maybe I want a little clarification, or maybe, and I think I know pieces of it, but if there's more to add, in the event, kind of the second option that we continue a start date as planned, the activities, the gymnastics, the volleyball, the soccer, the football, I know one part in moving those back a number of days, respectively. They're different in each case, I know. One of the reasons for that would be for some of the districts who have a later start to school may very well have a later start to the start of practice applied to them locally. But is there more to why we would move the starting date back for those activities and not the others? And I know a little bit more of that is the nature of those activities. Volleyball, you're face to face. Soccer, you're out there. Football, obviously, there's a lot of face to face and interaction, much more than cross country or tennis. But staff, is there more to differentiate those 4 activities, treated a little bit differently with a lated start time that has not been mentioned?
I'll certainly begin that response and offer the invitation to any of our staff members to respond. But we start with the fact that not all activities are created equally, and certainly the competition format for those, you cannot regulate social distancing in football. You cannot regulate social distancing in boys soccer. It is a contact activity, and a little bit extra time to see trends is important. A little bit extra time for schools to prepare is important. That information, knowing that the 3 activities, the 5 activities that begin on time, with debate and Scholars Bowl thrown in with cross country, tennis, and golf, is the fact that we know that those are level 1 sports as identified by the NFHS, and that's our governing body. There's a lot of research that's gone into that. We believe that can be, those can continue with social distancing as appropriate. There's a significant considerations that can be employed, and they're easier to employ. They don't take as much effort on behalf of the school district just to do that, because they've been doing many of those things all summer long. To prepare for some of the challenges for a soccer football game, a gymnastics match, and volleyball match that are both indoors, again, provides an extra week of time, an extra week of preparation, and an extra week of data to review at that local level for our schools. So that's really the balance of it from the health and safety side. From the competitive side, if we started them all at the same time, that's just one more competition opportunity. It's one more pressure point that schools feel to begin practice on time. It doesn't provide that option to really legitimately start practice a little bit later and not be that much farther behind. So closing that gap from the start of practice in terms of the number of competitions missed was important for our staff as a consideration.
Thank you.
Dina.
I am fine with the recommendations. I have never coached football or volleyball, so I really think I ought to listen to the experts on in that regard. I guess one of my concerns was having kids being able to, up to that point, be able to condition and lift and do other conditioning exercises that they participate in, and then have a break. And that didn't best thing for kids to be doing. I became a little concerned that we might, if we moved too far, we might see school districts say, well, you can't practice, you can't condition, and we'd have kids starting a competition that really their bodies wasn't conditioned to participate in. So this, I think, addresses the concern I have for that problem. So I'll sit back and listen to all of you who more experience at working with kids in that arena. So thank you.
Thank you, Dina. Mr. Herman, I see you biting that tongue.
Well, I just want to make it clear that I really appreciate what the staff's done and all of your work. It is hard because I think everybody around the state is guessing, what are we going to do? I also appreciate that we have come up with a plan that also saves the integrity of winter sports, hoping that we're in a better place to be able to participate with our winter sports. I know that many boards and school boards across the state are making decisions on how they're going to maintain their minutes so that they can get their kids through high school. I also want to make it another thing that I know that in my area, specifically with the start date of September 8th, is the middle school piece that I think is also important for us to look at. It is a local decision, but we are talking about transportation. These kids aren't in school yet in some cases, so it could be difficult. But again, those are decisions that can be made by those schools. But I wanted to make sure that we recognized and pointed that out. Again, I appreciate all your guys' efforts. I absolutely agree with the August 17th start. I think that, and to answer Dina's question, I know that many of our coaches and our kids have been heat acclimated. They've been working, a little bit more than probably normal because volleyball has been outside as well. And that they're usually in an air conditioned gym. So lifting weights and doing those things. So I know our kids are prepared and our coaches are prepared. It is the one thing that's important is that we have to know as interscholastic athletics and activities, we are competing against the club world. And there's club sports and I recognize that and understand that. And if we don't keep the integrity of our high school sports, those kids will have other places to go. So I think when we can put our educational background and understanding of how activities and athletics work from an interscholastic situation, I think it really does help us in the long run and helps those kids to make the right choice.
Mr. Haydock.
I would just think that pushing the start date on your volleyball, soccer, football, if you get into you're going to condense your season even more then, I think. And if you get some teams that have to quarantine or miss a game, and I think you're just taking more opportunities away. So I agree with the start date of August 17th and would like to see us just streamline the proposal that lets us get started and start competing as soon as we can.
Mr. Stonebreaker.
I don't think I have anything major to add. My major question, Greg answered right off the bat on the rationale for pushing those fall sports back. I don't know that I disagree with what Shannon just said. Part of the old coach in me starts thinking, okay, if I was still a football coach, we have the KSHSAA rule now that you can extend your camp. You can even have your camp a week before the season starts. And now we're pushing that first game back. There's going to be a lot of time there, a lot of practice time. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I just know as a former coach, even though I never thought we were prepared to play, I knew we needed to play because I needed to figure out what was going on. And I can't imagine what the soccer and volleyball coaches would feel, but also getting the opportunity to still work with their kids and still have the opportunity to play. I think that's the important piece. The one question I did have for Bill and the staff was, if the board of directors gets together and votes and does not accept this recommendation, let's say we as an executive board pass this recommendation as you present it, and they don't pass the modifications, do we fall back then on August 17th as our start date and everything is exactly as it had been printed in the handbook and we move forward?
To answer that question, Mr. Stonebreaker, that would be correct, unless at the board of directors meeting there was an alternative motion that was germane to the issue, and that was supported. But it would, without any other action from the board of directors, or without approval from the board of directors of what is proposed, we would revert back to the August 17th date and the handbook driven first days of competition.
And that could also be decided today if we chose as an executive board to start with our practice date of August 17th with the first competition date remaining the same.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Mr. Marlin.
I guess I'll begin by making a statement that I don't think anybody would disagree with. And that's, I'm not smart enough to make this decision. With so many variables involved in this and so many different things that will occur or can occur, that I guess I'm to the point now where I'm probably going to put my faith in the executive director and the assistant executive directors in the fact that they have taken the time, they have taken the effort to look through this and come up with what would probably be considered by most a fair compromise. I know there are going to be a lot of people that say, I'm still not convinced that we shouldn't just August 17th get started. We just go like we are. But I don't think there's anybody in the room that thinks that we're not going to have issues once we get started. And I think Major League Baseball is probably showing that right now. And I hope they're not a precursor to what could happen. But when it's all said and done, I'm afraid we're all going to be dealing with, we don't have enough kids to play tonight. How can we do that? What are we going to do to adjust schedules? And again, I'm hoping none of this happens. But I think there's probably chances that we're going to run into some issues here. And so I guess my point is I'm going to put my faith in Bill and the assistant executive directors. And this is a proposal that they have come up with. They have looked at it long and hard. They know how we can make it work. And I think it is a fair compromise.
Thank you, Monty. Mr. Perkins.
I've listened to everybody talk, and I don't have a lot to add to any of that. And I agree with Monty. I think that our staff there at KSHSAA has put a lot of time into this and research and have come back with a compromise to at least allow our student athletes to start practice and to compete against each other. So I'm still listening.
Okay. Mr. Castle, are you available? Okay, he must be still having trouble.
I think we've got him now.
Okay.
If we can start over. Mike, you want to start over? You all hear me now?
They probably can't hear you.
Yes, I can hear you.
All right. I kind of torn here. I certainly have all the way in the world of Bill and staff. So that's saying I'm going to support their issue. I wonder if we go ahead and start, we may get some games in, we may not get. Otherwise, I agree that I think we'll see something down the road, whether it's middle of September, middle of October, or January, we're going to see a return. So I just wonder if we would be better off to get kickoff and get games going and get as many as we can get before this kicks in. But I'll support what the staff has presented to us, because they worked awfully hard on this. They're the experts.
Bill, could you paraphrase for us what Mike said? I caught pieces of it, but not enough of it.
You bet. I think that Mike has expressed support of the staff's position, but he also expressed curiosity and uncertainty of whether or not we're going to be able to make it through the season, and would it be better to play as soon as possible, as opposed to waiting, because there may be an eventual suspension of activities either on a local or a more regional basis.
Agreed. Does anyone have anything further they would like to discuss on this topic? Okay, now I think we're at a junction where we need to either make a recommendation to modify, or correct me if I'm wrong, Bill, would we need a modification, or would we need a motion and a second to stay where we currently are with the 17th start date? First date of competition would be the normal date of competition.
If there's no motion, that becomes the reality. If there's a motion to change it, if there's a desire to change, there would need to be a motion, a second, and then a vote in affirmation of that. That vote would only go then to create, the actual motion is to create a board of directors agenda item to capture the changes that we identified on the proposed handbook rule changes.
But one of those is not the start date.
The majority of those are about the start date, and I'm not sure.
The start date of August 17th would
Right.
stay.
August 17th stays. I'm sorry. I heard a voice, and it was Fran clarifying that. What I
Yes.
should have clarified is that the modification does not involve a change to August 17th as an optional start practice day for our member schools.
Okay. Okay, so board members, we are at that point where we'll either make a motion to make an amendment to the competition dates, which would require a motion, a second, and then a vote. And if that vote passes, then it would become a board of directors agenda item. And Bill will get that scheduled as soon as possible.
So Alan, before we go there, I'm just going to ask a quick question. You know, you said early next week, if we were to make an amendment or a motion and second for the board of directors to get together to make their vote, you know, first week of August, first week of all months is usually our board board of education meetings. You know, so I was just wondering time frame and timeline on that, and then obviously, if we left everything alone to the August 17th with the traditional start date for all sports, that's not a vote that we need. I'm correct on that. Is that right?
That is correct. From my perspective, Jason and board, our effort would be to have this board meeting early Monday afternoon on August 3rd, hopefully in advance of, I'm not going to beat a noon board meeting, but we are going to beat evening board meetings on Monday, August 3rd.
Any further clarification? Seeing none. Okay, so we are back to that point. If there is no motion, then we are moving forward with the August 17th start date of activities, and competition dates would remain the same. There would be no modification to the first date of competition.
I'll make the motion. This is Monty. I'll make the motion that we accept the executive director and the staff's recommendation of modifying the start dates, but keeping the August 19th first practice date the same.
August 17th date.
August 17th.
Okay. So we have a motion on the floor of practice time beginning August 17th with the modifications presented by Bill and the staff.
Second.
Second by Mr. Perkins. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'm going to call for a roll vote. So when I call your name, please unmute yourself and vote yay or nay. Okay, Mr. Perkins?
Yay.
Mr. Stonebreaker?
No.
Mr. Haydock,
No.
Ms. Horst,
Yes.
Mr. Herman,
No.
Mr. Marlin,
Yay.
Mr. Rosenhagen,
No.
Mr. Castle,
Well,
Mike has voted yes via his speakerphone here.
he voted yes, and I am a no. So I have 5-4. Motion fails. So with that motion that fails, we will be starting activities August 17th with the original start dates of all activities that were printed. Am I correct on that, Bill?
With no board of directors motion, there's no further action that is needed by that board. So that is correct. We move forward as calendared, and I'll practice August 17th, competitions according to the handbook rule.
Okay.
Mr. Stein,
Yes, Mr. Perkins.
what does that do with the jamborees?
Mr. Faflik, Mr. Lentz.
Jamborees, as we have been sharing with member schools, are discouraged as part of our considerations. But if a member school chooses to do those, that is certainly their prerogative. If they do so, they are given the freedom to only schedule one opposing team. So there will be 2 teams in a jamboree as opposed to the traditionally required 3. And you made that approval this past week when we adopted the consideration. So Mark may have further input for us there. But we cannot, this board, this executive board, nor the staff can set aside the opportunity for the jamborees to exist. They exist in handbook rule. We are just discouraging them as a strong discouragement to have those instead to focus on the game opportunities. So remains a local decision in that regard, Mr. Perkins.
Thank you, Bill.
Thanks.
Does anyone have anything further?
Dina. Dina has a question.
Yes, Dina.
I really don't have a question, but more of a comment that before anyone does a jamboree, it might be a good idea to check with their local health official before they make that decision, because that is really one of the components within the navigating change operations component. And I know that Roger probably could testify to this, but I was listening to Dr. Watkins kind of caution superintendents about doing things that they were not, that their health officials had recommended against. So you might want to check with them before you set one up. Just a thought. Thank you.
Thank you, Dina.
I have one other question
Yes, Mr. Stonebreaker.
as we move forward, and this may not be the time, but will and I think I know the answer to this because I think it was in the considerations, Bill and staff, but as far as allow for fans at games and how many fans we have and those types of things, is that local jurisdiction, league groups? I know that's a question we've been bantering around quite a bit, and we're getting a lot of those questions, and we can talk another time about that if this isn't the appropriate venue.
we're happy to respond to that at this point, and continue to do that through our administrative seminars. The one size fits all is certainly applicable, not applicable in this regard in terms of facilities, in terms of contests, and in terms of how local health authorities will regulate that. So that is a local decision. Your local health department will provide for you your capacity limits for those contests that are held outside, as well as those contests that are held in your facilities. Using the considerations helps spread those out. So you can have smaller groups of kids participating, but bottom line, it comes down to what your local health authority decides is the appropriate number of participants, including the kids in competition and the adult fans that may come to watch.
Does anyone have any other questions for Bill or staff, or any other comments? Bill, do you have anything for us?
No, I appreciate your engagement in this process. I know that one of the questions was what or comments was that we're going to hope for, a continued decline in this, and certainly, I learned a long time ago, hope is not a strategy. It's certainly what we do, but hope is not a strategy. I hope that all of our member schools and all of our stakeholders provide the very best opportunity by engaging in appropriate social distancing, wearing masks, personal hygiene, washing hands, and make sure they're communicating, if they are a participant, their current health condition, so that we don't compromise a team or a season, because we know that there are causes bigger than ourselves, and we need to make sure that our coaches and athletes understand that if they need to sit because they're sick, they need to sit, and then they can get back to action much sooner, and they would not take anybody else out of participation opportunities because they thought that they could hide something like that. So please keep that in mind, that we're going to hope, yes, but we're also going to be strategic in how we respond and how we engage and how we employ those considerations.
Hey, Alan.
Yes, Mr. Herman.
Thank you. First, staff, thank you for all your hard work. I really appreciate it. Everything you guys have done, and you are the experts, and we appreciate all that work. I do want to ask, is there going to be something that we posted or communications that will go out to the schools so that they're aware of where we're continuing, or the decision that was made today?
Absolutely, that will go out. Jeremy is usually prepared with multiple press releases, and he now needs to pick option B instead of A, or A instead of B. And we'll try to get something out yet this afternoon to our member schools, member school administrators and superintendents.
Thank you, Mr. Herman, for that question. That was at the tip of my tongue, and I had spaced it off. So thank you. I would like to come on and just say thank you to all of the board members. I know these last few weeks dealing with trying to come up with this time frame, and all the questions and all the emails that we've been receiving, and the comments. I know it gets taxing, and like I said, I appreciate your professionalism. I appreciate you making time out of your busy schedules to join us and to talk about these tough decisions. And staff and Bill, I can't thank you enough for all of the time and efforts that you've put into all the documents that you have given us, and all the information that you keep sending us as well to keep us apprised of the situation. And like I said, I think we're in good hands, and I look forward to continuing to meet with this board and the staff. And that's all I have. Mr. Pfaflik or staff, do you guys have anything else to add?
And just to be clear, Alan, I'm just making it abundantly clear that there's no change to practice or competition, but all of the considerations that were provided to member schools are still in place and are still expected to be followed at the very best ability of our member schools. Those are to be adapted to your locale and for those competitions. And we want to make sure that you understand and our member schools understand that those remain in place. And we do our very best to mitigate the risk of exposure to those that are in our facilities. Mr. Lentz has an additional comment, I believe.
Yeah, and we'll talk about this, but I'll probably have a couple of considerations at another time on seating criteria. And like Bill talked about on the marginal points issue, just in case that way we're dealing with the COVID-19 potential cancellation of games.
Thank you, Mark. Anyone have anything further?
Hey, President Stein,
Mr. Haydock.
I'd just like to pass on to the board and to the staff. And I know we recognize Representative Ryan for his recognition. I believe it was last week. But I'd like to pass on condolences to Janelle Smith Carson family. Janelle just lost a battle with some cancer recently. She is was a pioneer in girls track and field, and ran in the Olympics. Just a very humble person. I believe she's a member of the Hall of Fame at KSHSAA, and probably several others. I know that for a fact, but just a tough deal. And but I just wanted to let the family know that there's people out there thinking of them and of Janelle. So that's all I had.
Thank you, Shannon. Anything further? Hearing none, seeing none, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Moved by Mr. Perkins. Second by Mr. Stonebreaker. I see the double deuce. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. We are adjourned.